much as science knowledge only adds to the excitement, the mystery, and the awe of a flower.
Evidence is evidence. It's public, everybody can look at the evidence and assess it, and eventually, if there's enough evidence, come to the same conclusion.
Cockatoos with attitude. Cockatoo.
Hi, and welcome to Cockatoos with Attitude. My name is Don Scott. I am the founder and executive director of the Cloacal Sanctuary for Parrots and Cockatoos. This is our second installment in our series on avian disorders and disease. Today we're talking about cloacal prolapses, which is basically when the insides of the vent come out. And of course we'll go into greater detail. And for those of you who think, well, I don't have a bird with this problem, and it's not something that I need to know about. It is not that common for this particular problem to occur, but I'll tell you, when I was videoing this with Dr. Jenkins, who's going to tell us all about this, Dr. Jenkins of the Avian and Exotic Animal Hospital in San Diego, who's been working with birds for 28 years in his own practice, he actually said something that made me realize one of the birds we have with us, Sugar, who's not in here at the moment, that she actually is heading towards a prolapse. We don't have any definitive answers as to how to prevent this, but we have some good ideas that may help and that seem logical. Unfortunately, as with everything in the avian world, there's not a lot of money to research these things, and the less common something is, then the less likely any research is going to be done at all. The Lily Sanctuary, Lily, who was this wonderful umbrella cockatoo, she died of this, and it's a horrible way to go. Usually they die of infection, or they die under anesthesia when you're doing the last procedure to try to fix it. So, with Bob, I keep him pretty clean, but you can see how dirty his vent is. And that's just from today, that he's being given a mash that actually invites him to evacuate more generously and without as much straining. And at the end of this video, there are some excellent tips by Dr. Jenkins about what kind of diet to give your bird. He's got some ideas about pellet-only diets, and he likes pellets, but he'll tell you why he thinks you need to add other things. I encourage you, even if you're not interested in prolapses and you don't think that your bird is heading that way, I encourage you to watch the whole video so that you can be aware of how to diagnose them, or at least to see them on their way, because you don't want to go through this with your bird. Also, those of you who are interested in nutrition for birds, and Dr. Jenkins does a great job at the end talking about that. And you can also see our video called Bob's Mash. It's an 11-minute video out at YouTube, and it talks about the mash we're now using for all the birds, and it's amazing. The size of the poop used to be about the size of a quarter for most of the birds, some smaller when we got them. And now we're talking about the size of a dollar. We do have on our blog, we do have a section on poopology, so it's good to know that stuff, because it'll tell you about disease. It will help you to get a handle on something before it gets out of your control. Pay particular attention to the nutrition section and feeding at the end, which may prevent your bird from possibly developing this. And also to the signs that show that it's on its way. If you can catch it early enough, it's possible, we don't know for sure, but that the proper nutrition and enough liquid in their diet may prevent it from showing up either for a long time and may actually stop it altogether. We don't know. And please, if you can find it in your heart to give something to us, $5, $10, something. It costs a fortune to take care of these birds. each of these birds, like Bob, for example, with everything we have to do with him and his medical exams and everything, it's running about $2,000 a year for him. We have 12 birds here, all very damaged, and we'd appreciate it if you could help out. And if you could go to patreon.com and become a patron, so that every time we produce one of these videos, that's roughly every 2 weeks, it'll give us a little something to keep us going with these videos. It takes a long time to put them together. The average time to put together a video is 30 hours, and you're talking quite a bit of late night work for me. So we would appreciate it if you could help us, and we value all of our patrons. Thank you so much for donating and helping us to care for these birds and to produce these videos to help educate the public. And, of course, we learn more as we go along, too. So here we go. This is Dr. Jenkins of the Avian and Exotic Animal Hospital in San Diego.
Okay, so cloacal prolapse. Cloacal prolapse is primarily a disease of old world birds and mostly cockatoos. Although we do see some in African greys and eclectus and some other species, I would say 80% at least is probably cockatoos. And maybe a little more common in large breeds of cockatoos, Moluccans, the large sulfur-cresteds, umbrellas, but we see it in all of them. It typically presents early as birds who have dirty vents. They have droppings on their tail feathers. That's probably where most people see it, and then the people who just aren't quite as observant see birds who are straining to pass droppings, and oftentimes grunting or groaning or squeaking when they go. And the reason for that is that these birds are putting on an abdominal press to try and get the urine and feces that's in their cloaca to come out. Sometimes people notice the smell to their urine or their feces because this material, the feces and urine, isn't being passed on a regular basis. It gives time for bacteria to grow in there, so you get those sour, sweet, fermenting, infected dropping smell. Some of those birds also have cloacitis, the birdie equivalent of a urinary tract infection, where the lining of their cloaca gets inflamed, and then they feel an urgency to go, or they strain even more to try and pass droppings. Some birds will actually even form what are called cloacal liths, which is the equivalent of a bladder stone, because that material stays in there long enough, and with the bacteria and stuff, that urine and feces will form an actual concretion that'll fill their cloaca. And what's going on, but what people don't notice right off usually, is the fact that the bird's lost the ability to normally use its vent. Their vents don't pucker up and contract the way that they're supposed to, and so that's partially why they dribble urine or feces out of their vent. And the contractions, the peristaltic contractions that empty their vent, no longer work quite right. So in order to empty the urine and feces out of there, they have to press with their abdominal wall. Now, if they do that long enough, what happens is the contraction tends to not only push the material that's in their cloaca out, but it tends to try and push their whole cloaca out. And as that happens, the cloaca gets stretched more and more and more, so that just the size of the cloaca, both from being overly full of urine and feces, and being stretched by the abdominal contractions, gets baggier and baggier and baggier. Then one day they put on this big abdominal contraction and plop, the whole cloaca turns inside out, like you're turning your socks inside out. If they haven't noticed it before, people notice that there's something wrong with their bird then, because they've got this big pink raspberry sticking out of their vent. Diagnosis. Well, we diagnose it by both just based on physical signs, but not only the fact that something's sticking out, but that tissue is relatively normal that's sticking out. There's no mass or tumor or growth in there. We diagnose it also on the fact that these birds don't have normal muscle tone or sensation to those tissues. So I take and pinch their vent or poke them with something sharp in that cloacal tissue. They can't feel me do it. But there's no real test. We don't know what causes it. So there isn't a diagnostic blood test. There isn't a diagnostic culture. So it's based pretty much on that history of this slowly developing signs and symptoms of having prolapse, and then the prolapse itself. So the other things that we do.
I have to say something because I'm going to forget.
Sure.
You just said something about that grunting sound.
Uh-huh.
Sugar was doing that.
Oh.
I put her on that new diet, the squash and the pellets mixed into it. She's not making that sound anymore. And it's coming out. And she never had anything like, it didn't look like she was straining, but she would make that sound. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which is them putting on the abdominal press, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, because in order to do it, they have to close their vocal folds, which I'm pointing to my chest because the vocal folds of birds are in their syrinx, where their windpipe diverges, divides in half, rather than up here. But they close they have to, in order to press hard, they have to close that so that when they put the pressure on, their abdomen doesn't just blow air out of their lungs. Their air sacs. So when they press down hard, some of that air is going to blow through their closed vocal folds, and they make that grunty noise. Yeah, so I guess part of diagnosis, also is proving that they don't have something else. So, and understanding what secondary problems they have. So it wouldn't be uncommon for a bird who had cloacal prolapse to get a culture done of its cloaca, having some basic blood work done, a white count and chemistries, make sure there isn't something else obvious going on, make sure they don't have an infection that's significant enough that they need systemic antibiotics. Maybe an x-ray, because this is a neurological thing. We want to rule out that they didn't break their back or have something else happen that would, to their spinal cord, they don't have a tumor, something that would be interrupting the nerve flow back and forth from that area of their cloaca. And those things would be uncommon, but it would be stupid to miss them. So those three things might be involved in the diagnosis as well. But they're actually aimed at ruling out other things, not really trying to prove that, the syndrome. So.
If you are enjoying our videos, we hope that you can find it in your heart to support our work. It costs between $25,000 to $30,000 a year to care for our flock of heartbroken and abused birds. Most of our birds came with feather-destructive disorder. Even a basic exam with blood work costs $300. Medical emergencies cost us thousands a year. We are a non-profit, and donations are tax-deductible to the full extent of the law. We need your support. Birds deserve a happy and healthy life. Become our patron at www.patreon.com/Chloe Sanctuary to support us on a per-video basis, or donate at our webpage today.
The syndrome is hard to understand. We know that these birds lose nervous function in their cloaca and their vent. They usually don't have it's not a diverse nerve loss, because they don't have nerve loss to their legs or to their abdominal muscles or their tail. It's just to their cloaca and their vent. So that's kind of strange. We've been phenomenally unsuccessful at fixing them. So anti-inflammatories like NSAIDs, that whole ibuprofen, aspirin, naproxen family, the ones we tend to use in birds is meloxicam, probably more than anything else. We use Celebrex and some of the other veterinary anti-inflammatories as well. and even steroids, although we try not to use steroids in birds. We'll sometimes put these guys on steroids to see if, because nerve damage in mammals oftentimes will respond to steroids, but this disease does not seem to respond to that, doesn't respond to antibiotics. There's kind of a school of thought that this has something to do with egg laying or reproductive behavior, but at least in our population, we see almost as much of it in males as females. The female birds are only slightly overrepresented. So it may have something to do with that, but if it was about egg laying, you wouldn't see any of it in males. So I don't think it's actual egg laying itself. So I don't think that spaying or neutering these birds, we've tried drugs like Depolupron or Deslorelin, both of which turn off hormones. They turn off both testosterone and estrogen. That doesn't seem to improve these birds. Now the question may exist that if we turn those hormones off before, would they not develop this problem? But it's pretty hard to say. We certainly are not going to do that on every cockatoo, and knowing which ones are going to develop, it's a small population that get cloacal prolapse, so knowing that your bird's going to get it or not get it doesn't seem to is impossible to know, and if they already have any symptoms, putting them on those drugs doesn't seem to stop it, in my experience. So how we treat it is more by treating them symptomatically, and the big symptom is try and keep their vents closed up enough that when they put on the abdominal press, they don't turn themselves inside out, and fixing their diet so that their droppings are soft and easily passed, and they don't have, which oftentimes means adding vegetables to their diet and more non-digestible fiber, so they have softer stool, and putting them in a situation where it's easy for them to go to the bathroom. So you wouldn't want a bird who sitting on the ground all day, or sitting in a little fuzzy bed hut or things like that would discourage them passing stool. You want them to try getting them out and off their perch. So because most birds, as soon as you pick them up off their perch, want to go to the bathroom. So getting them out often, putting them on open perches, all those things seem to help, because it just increases frequency of passing stool. In the literature, there's a variety of ways to try and stop that cloaca from coming out, and I'm responsible for one of those, what's called a circumcostal cloacopexy. Pretty big mouthful of words. And there's a number of other cloacopexies described. Cloacopexy means to attach your cloaca to something else. Pexy means to attach, or it's like a spot weld, or but despite the fact that I came up with one of those surgeries, we try not to do cloacopexies if we can help it in my practice, because we found if we just suture the vent closed a little bit, and we usually just do stay sutures, that we can get as much as 6 months out of a single set of sutures before they have to be replaced. And that can be done over and over again for literally years on end before we have to do the cloacopexy. Once we do a cloacopexy, it has a similar year to 2 year lifespan, and it's hard to redo it. Once it's done, it's challenging, perhaps not impossible, but challenging to do again. So we try to save that for a last resort, once or twice in the bird's life sort of situation. So what we do is the vent of a bird, although it has a sphincter, is more of like a set of lips than a pulled closed, purse string closure. It's not a round little opening. It's more of a set of lips like this. So what we do with the birds who have prolapse is about 1/4 of the way in from either side, we put a big substantial nylon suture that has multiple knots tied in it so that it doesn't come untied, and that suture will stay there for months, and it just decreases the center opening of the vent, so when they put on that abdominal press, they don't turn themselves inside out. And that works on a lot of them. There's some of them, if they're really stretched out and their vents are really big, we do cloaco plasty is what we want, vent plasty. And what we do is on either edge of the lips of that vent, we'll cut tissue away from the junction between skin and mucous membrane for that same quarter of the diameter of the vent on either side, and then we close mucous membrane to mucous membrane and skin to skin, so we literally close the opening of the vent by that amount. We typically still put the sutures in because we need some support on that tissue till it heals and forms good scar tissue, but that'll permanently make the opening of the vent smaller, although in any of these scenarios, that opening of that vent tends to slowly get stretched out and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So we use that vent plasty, close the size of the opening when it's finally gotten so big that it's hard to keep the vent closed with just 2 sutures. So we do those for literally as long as we can with those birds, typically years, 2, 3, 4 years of cloacoplasty. So we're usually seeing these birds 2 or 3 times a year to touch them up or whatever. Sometimes they'll lose a suture, we'll just throw it back in. And when they finally, that's just not working them anymore, or they can prolapse even though they're down to a small amount of vent, then we'll do the cloacopexy, and there's a number of ways we can do that. The earliest ones, all that would happen is that the surgeon would put his finger up the bird's vent while it's asleep, of course, and tissues would be prepared surgically and everything, and a big old suture would be put through his abdominal wall, his or her abdominal wall, through the vent, back out through the abdominal wall, and a knot would be tied in it. And that would create a little attachment where the sutures came through, like a spot weld. And that would work, as long as the suture was in there, it would work pretty good. But that suture would come out in a period of time, and then our experience is that those little attachments would only hold on for maybe 6 months, a year at the outset, and they would come undone. The good thing about that suture, or that approach, if there is one, is that it's probably the least damaging to the cloacal tissue, and you're more likely to be able to do something else in the future. So if you're going to do an original cloacopexy, that's probably not a bad idea, although even that procedure can cost hundreds of dollars by the time you get the bird anesthetized and all that sort of thing in the hospital for a day. And so you're not getting a lot for your return. The second one that was described, and one that I think is probably done more than anything, an incision is made in the bird's abdomen, and then the fat removed between the abdominal wall and the cloaca, so that the cloaca can sit right against the abdominal wall, and then the incision in the abdominal wall is closed, or the cloaca is closed into that incision when you close it. So when you suture up that incision, every stitch you take a bite of the cloaca. And that works pretty well, and it lasts almost as long as some of the other things. However, the cloaca will stretch out enough that it'll start prolapsing again, and going back in to ever repair it again is almost impossible, because you have this big adhesion right down the midline where you'd like to go in to do it again, and when you open that up, it's almost impossible to get in there without opening up the cloaca, which we don't want to do. Then you get the serosal cloacopexies, or my circumcostal cloacopexy, where with the just peritoneal type serosal cloacopexy, both those require the condition to be chronic enough that the bladder portion of the cloaca is thickened. But then you can actually make a partial incision partway through the cloaca and an incision in the serosal cloacopexy and in the abdominal wall, and you do something very similar to what's done down the midline, but you do it on either side. So you're at at 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock on the cloaca, you're attaching it to the abdominal wall, pulling it way up and attaching it. That holds it. It's like pulling your underwear up if you have baggy underwear, I guess. And it keeps them up because it's like pinning them up with a couple of safety pins, I guess. And that lasts longer than the midline one, but it doesn't last as long as the one that I thought of, which is the circumcostal one. It's kind of the really bad boys, or who have really stretched out cloaca one. And what we do is we split we make an incision in their cloaca and then peel off a little teeny flap. Then we take cut the lining of the bird's abdominal cavity over a rib and dissect the muscle off of that. We take that flap and pull it around the rib, and then we suture it back to the cloaca, and we suture it to the abdominal wall. So now you have these big, strong flaps that hold the cloaca up. It lasts longer than any of them, and you might even get 2 or 3 years out of it, but still the cloaca eventually stretches out long enough that even though it's tacked up there, it starts hanging out of the vent again. And still, typically on most of these guys, you still need the vent sutures so that urine and stuff doesn't just pour out of their, leak out of their vent in between dropping. So, discouraging problem. We don't know what causes it. So possibilities are, trauma if the bird fell and hurt its back, or disease, but nobody's found a virus or anything. Trauma related to egg laying, but the boys get it. We don't really know. Hormones other than, just being hormonal, whether it's testosterone or estrogen, maybe, but turning off their hormones doesn't seem to fix it. Discouraging problem. Lots of these birds eventually get put to sleep because they're not happy. How do you prevent it? We don't know, because we don't know what causes it really. I think that the best thing that I would tell you is have your bird be physically active, because I think that that's what it's related to. I think it's related to a sedentary lifestyle. So birds who live their lives standing on a flat, round perch in a cage where there isn't much room to move, day after day, month after month, year after year, are probably more prone to get it. I think birds who live in big aviaries and certainly, potentially even get to fly or have lots of activity are probably less likely to get it. And if nothing else, they'd be happier in the environment. So even if they got cloacal prolapse, they'd would have had a better life before they got it. So it's a discouraging disease. We don't like to see them.
Yeah, Bob's doing much better, but it's a nicely kind of head there. Where he's going.
Yeah, I tell you. So I didn't really talk about it, but I think that birds who have good diets and are active and stuff like that, even if they have it, they do better. They go back and stand on that perch forever. I think that they're, they don't do as well with their treatment. So.
Well, I know that this diet that, because of you, I developed with the rowdy bush in it and the squash and everything. Birds that were pooping a 50-cent piece are now overnight they're pooping $1 worth of it, and
it's got all that fiber in it.
That tail goes down, the tail goes up, it's done, and they're on. I mean, it's just really fast. But before, I actually saw a little bit of a smaller volume, obviously, but I also saw that the motions were slower as far as going. Now they're just.
Plus, I think that this is just an observation. I can't prove it, but I think parrots are not big water drinkers across the board. Even parrots from tropical environments and stuff, they get most of their water from their food. And so, obviously, parrots will drink, but I think they do better with moist, wet foods than they do with a bowl of water. So feeding it, one of my concerns about pellet-only diets is that it's dry. And birds, I think those birds oftentimes don't drink as much water as I would like to see them drink. I don't have any way to prove that at this point in time, but that's the gut feeling I have from being around those birds who do nothing but that. I think that they're great diets, and there's some really great pellets out there, Rowdy Bush, Harrison's, a lot of those diets. But I think I'm at least reluctant to feed my own birds nothing but pellets, because I just don't think that it's not all about nutrition, it's also about format. In the 60s, with the advent of, science diet and, science diet, instant breakfast and some of those things, I think nutritionalists, not physiologists, but nutritionalists kind of felt like in the 60s that they'd had our diet figured out so that you could get everything you needed in this one little wafer or one big tablet. You get all the amino acids and fats and whatever you needed, and we could just put it in this. That's all you'd have to do. But the reality is that you can't do that. You have to have fiber in your diet. You have have to have, certain other format issues with your diet for you to really be healthy. Your colon was made to be driven by the presence of long fiber, because we're a fermentive herbivore physiologically, and without the fiber, your colon just doesn't work right. And there's other aspects besides that. But I think that's also true for birds. And I think so to get nothing but, as much as I love it, Harrison's or Rowdy Bush or one of those other diets, misses the format aspect of that. So that's why my birds eat something similar, a combination of foods which includes a pellet, so they get that broad nutritional base from the pellet. But I think having, high fiber vegetables and some fruits and some other things in there that add to that, from the format standpoint, is probably important.
It's funny too with the mash that I get the Costco organic vegetables too, and I mix it in there. So a lot of them will go for that corn.
Sure.
When they're eating the corn, it's all coated with the mash.
Yeah.
So they're getting all that liquid with the rowdy bush in it, and and the squash and everything. And I don't know.
Yeah, in the summertime, I tend to pull the corn out of my birds' mash because I'm trying to decrease their calories as well. Yeah. But because my birds go outside pretty much 360 days out of the year or whatever. I mean, if it's raining horizontally, my birds stay in. But every other day, if it's raining and chilly, they still go out. But they do that every day, so they're all hardened off and accustomed to it. But I do give them more calories, so I will add some seed to their diet during really cold days. All winter long, they get some more high-calorie, carbohydrate-y things because I'm just trying to get more concentrated calories in them. And they do eat more when it's cold. So I'm just trying to kind of compensate for their environment. But in the summertime, when it's hot and nice, and I try to pull as much of that stuff out as possible because I don't want them fat. So try to I want them to have as much food as they want to eat, but not overdose their calories. Because I think birds are like us; they will eat well beyond their caloric needs if they like the food. So.
Yeah, I've seen it too.
Yeah, obesity is a big problem, and especially in some species. Amazons and macaws and some other birds really. Rose-breasted cockatoos, huge problem in those cases. And we just try and get them off seeds as fast as possible completely because Rosie's eating seeds is just a formula for disaster.
Yeah, Sugar, because that was a good name for her because of the stuff they were giving her. She lost about 50 grams over time, and she stayed around 850 as far as the weight.
Yeah.
But she was overweight with all this junk they were feeding her, and she's happy, but it's a tough one trying to get the right food into her. She eats the mash. It's fine.
If you are enjoying our videos, we hope that you can find it in your heart to support our work. It costs between $25,000 to $30,000 a year to care for our flock of heartbroken and abused birds. Most of our birds came with feather destructive disorder. Even a basic exam with blood work costs $300. Medical emergencies cost us thousands a year. We are a non-profit, and donations are tax-deductible to the full extent of the law. We need your support. Birds deserve a happy and healthy life. Become our patron at www.patreon.com/Chloe Sanctuary to support us on a per-video basis. Or donate at our webpage today.
So you want to know about me?
Yeah,
and my background. I grew up in the mountains outside of Salt Lake City. Not on a big ranch or something, but a big enough piece of property that we were pretty isolated and in an environment where houses were far apart. But I grew up around all sorts of animals. We had dogs and eventually cats in the house, but I got to raise animals, baby animals. We chased and caught lizards. We raised the baby birds who fell out of nests. We had a Raven, who adopted us and came back year after year after year every summer to live at our house and eat the dog food. I raised a deer who turned out, a fawn who turned out to be blind when he grew up. I don't know if that's why it got isolated from its parents or if it had something else going on. The fish and game agent who took it away when we discovered it was blind never reported back as to the cause. All sorts of other animals. So I had my first parakeets and guinea pigs that were my own when I was 5, 6, 7. I had rabbits by the time I was 7 or 8. I was breeding rabbits and guinea pigs by the time I was in my early teens, mostly to support my animal addiction. I was lucky in that I knew that I wanted to do this when I was little. When I was in 2nd grade, I repeat this story all the time, but when I was in 2nd grade and I got to go to the school's library for the very first time, I checked out Dr. Dolittle, and that was in the early 60s, and it was right after the book had come out. As a matter of fact, I remember it was on the new bookshelf. So long before the movie came out, just to age myself. But I took that book home and had my mother read it to me as a training manual, because I knew I wanted to do this, and I thought that Dr. Dolittle book would be a good way to kind of let me know what I needed to know to be an exotic animal veterinarian. I remember the first time I ever went to see a veterinary hospital, I was very disappointed because it wasn't anything like I thought it should be. My hospital's much more like I would have liked it to be when I saw that. So I went to high school and college. Lots of people told me you're not likely to get into vet school, but thank God I was able to. Went to the University of Utah, got my undergraduate degree in biology with a strong emphasis in comparative physiology. That's my passion. I love comparative physiology. Went to vet school at Colorado State University, and then I was blessed to get to do a kind of a training position with the two big gurus of exotic animal medicine on the West Coast, Walt Roscoff and Rick Werpel. Rick, bless his soul, is dead and gone, died of colon cancer, but Walt's still seeing patients in Hawthorne, California. But these guys are responsible for the vast majority of the drug doses we still use today in these animals, and I would say 90% of the blood values that we use when we test them, as far as CBC and chemistries. It was kind of funny because I think the academic community really gave them a hard time and criticized them over the stuff that they published on those normals. But I think they've been vindicated because today, 30 years later, we still use all their zinc values, so they were right. They just, same for both the antibiotic doses and a number of other drug doses, which they had to do kind of more through trial and error because they weren't doing, blood levels and things like that. They were just doing what they could, flying by the seat of their pants and finding out what worked and keeping track of it, so. But because I spent 3 years with Walt and Rick, I think I'm here where I am today, and I never would have been here had I not had that opportunity. So they're a big part of my success of being a bird and exotic animal veterinarian. Moved to San Diego in 1985, opened this hospital in March of 1987. Moved in November of 85, so it took me a little while to get the thing up and running, and it's been going for 28 years as of the first of this month. Got to see a lot of things, but it's the animals that teach me stuff more than anything. And we've been wise enough, I'd like to say, to go look. So every animal that dies unexpectedly, I'm twisting somebody's arm to let me do the post-mortem on it to find out what it had, why it died, what was going on. And I don't resent doing any of those necropsies over 30 years. I've done lots and lots and lots of necropsies. I was lucky enough to get included in the political aspect of bird medicine and reptile medicine and small mammal medicine, and get to be part of that community and help direct the direction that some of that medicine went for years and years. I've been kind of out of the political end since the late 90s. Now my kids are grown up, I may get back in, so they'd better watch out. Because, I don't know, The other thing about being in this business is you get to develop an opinion, and I certainly have mine. So the caveat with everything is that this is my opinion. Some of it's proven, some of it's challenging, if not impossible to prove. At least where we are today. So thankfully, I'm still here. Hopefully, I'll be here for a lot of years to go. I like going to work every day. Part of it's liking people, because I meet people all the time who go, I want to be a veterinarian because I don't really like people that well. But my business is really a people business, because everything we do is negotiation. We have to work out, because it's not like human medicine where we just get to do everything we want with your patient. Somebody has to pay for it, I'm afraid, and so everything we do, pretty much, we sit down and try to figure out how to make it work. How do we do enough to save your animal at a price that you can afford? So it's unfortunate, or fortunate, I don't know which, but it's the way veterinary medicine is.
Please be sure and sign up at YouTube as one of our subscribers. And if you can find it in your heart, become one of our patrons, giving us $5 or $10 every time we produce one of these videos. That's twice a month. Average, it's every other week. Sometimes it may be a little longer than that. We may run into a situation where it might take us 3 weeks to put out a video. But we would certainly appreciate your help. And Bob would appreciate it, wouldn't you, Bob? Wouldn't you, Bob? Yeah. Bob says yes. Well, he doesn't say that. Babaloo, oops, Babaloo, what you doing? Bob, kisses? Aw, thank you, Bob. Babaloo, kisses? Aw, thank you, Bob. Kiss? I love you, Bob. I remember taking him into the vet, one of our vets, and he said, well, I'm going to have to examine him, so we're going to have to look into his cloaca, and I said, okay, well, here you go, Doc. And I just handed Bob to him like this. This is something you need to learn to do as veterinary behaviors. Opening up their wings, where they don't have a problem with it, being able to look down their throat. Right, Bob? Right, Bob? Thank you for watching Cockatoo. Cockatoos with attitude. Say bye, Bob. Say bye-bye.
We welcome your feedback on our videos. We look forward to your insights, tips, questions, stories, and pictures. You can email us at cockatoo@chloesanctuary.org, reach us on Twitter @Chloe Sanctuary, and join with us on our Facebook Chloe Sanctuary page. Please visit our website at www.chloesanctuary.org. That's Chloe spelled CHLOE. You can support us on a per-episode basis by visiting www.patreon.com, that's PATREON, /Chloe Sanctuary.